Good morning and welcome to Pivot, the future of events. And I hope you're all doing okay this morning. I know that this is one of the industries that has been particularly hammered during this crisis, and it's absolutely normal and to be expected that people are not just worried, but pretty scared about what the next year to 18 months is going to bring for them and their businesses. But that's why this morning we've assembled this incredible panel, 10 people of national and international experts in every aspect of the events industry, from event organizers to locations, to brand managers. So everybody's going to have something constructive to offer you with some advice and their thoughts and insights on how we get through the immediate hitch and maybe what the medium to long term holds for the events industry. Just to add my own thoughts on how I think it's going, you know, economists often complain about the confidence fairies, people who are optimistic when things are going bad. But I firmly believe this industry does have a very strong future and that we will have what they call reversion to the mean, getting back to normal. So not this new normal that they're talking about, but getting back to where people are meeting each other in a physical presence. Because that's, you know, our human nature. That's what people want. They really want that deep social, physical connection. And I think that's where the pull will bring us. So yes, I'm the confidence fairy this morning, but I think there's a lot of evidence to show that is where we're going. So our format this morning is that we have two separate panels of 5. So each speaker in a panel will give about 3 minutes to kick off with their thoughts. I'll put a few questions to them, but of course it's your questions that we really want answered this morning. So make sure to contribute in the Q&A part of your Zoom app there, and the questions will be moderated and sent to me, and I can put them live to the panelists. The whole event will be recorded and sent to you afterwards, so you'll be able to pass along to any colleagues or friends who haven't been able to join us this morning. So keep an eye out for that in your inboxes. So I'll kick off and introduce our first panel this morning, and I'm sure all the people are well known to you since you're involved in this industry. They are Sean Lemass, the Managing Director of SDL Exhibitions, Sarah Murphy, Managing Director of Business Post iQuest, who's organised this event this morning and invited me to take part. Thank you, Sarah. Susan Kirby is the Chief Executive of St. Patrick's Festival. Graham Slattery is a Senior Managing Director at Teneo, and Monica O'Byrne is Director of Sales and Marketing at the Clayton Hotel, Burlington Road, the largest conference hotel, I think, in Ireland. So I'm going to kick off with Sean. Do you want to give us your top few thoughts on where you think the industry can move forward?
Thank you, Sarah. It's great to be here, and I think it's a testament to our industry that we've come together like this, where we tend to operate in our own little cells all around the country, on our own, running our own events or our own venues or whatever. Like most industries now, this has brought us together, and we have strength together, and we can have a voice together. For our part, we're exhibition organisers, as you probably know specifically. Been running trade exhibitions and consumer exhibitions since 1976, so we're over 40 years in the business. We've downsized in recent years. We're getting on a little bit, but we've been through various recessions. We've had a similar type of situation to this in 2001 with foot and mouth disease. We had the boat show. We were running the boat show at the time for the Irish Marine Federation, and we had to postpone the show 5 days before it opened. The boats had already started arriving in the RDS and the carpets were down. But we recovered. We ran it again the following year. With this crisis, it's come very suddenly. Obviously, we haven't had time to adjust like in the financial recession, where we could adjust our program and our overhead and so on over a period of years. I think that the thing is, some events will survive and some events won't. We had a much larger program before the crash, but the strong events came through. They downsized dramatically, by often turnover dropped by more than 50%. And I suppose my message today and my warning to the industry is really we have to budget realistically. I'm certainly working on the basis that we will see a 50% reduction in turnover for each event next year. Certainly in stand space sales, I think consumer attendance might hold up if we can give confidence. And we're working on that towards that within our own Exhibition Organisers Association. We're putting together the various protocols. We'll have a submission to government this week, and we're hoping to see exhibitions return in the autumn. But it's all very uncertain, and it makes it particularly difficult because you need time to plan an event. The London Ideal Home Show in March was cancelled when the build-up was already almost completed. It was postponed. It was postponed to the beginning of August, and I just heard this morning that it's not going to go ahead until next year. So you need time, because obviously you incur costs, and the exhibitors all incur costs if it's too close. So we need the roadmap is great so long as we can stick to it. But the impact is going to be significant, and I think everybody needs to be cautious and realistic into the future, because it's the recession, not the virus, that's going to cause us the major problems.
Mm-hmm. Sarah Murphy, Managing Director, Business Post iQuest, your turn.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. As many of you know, I'm Managing Director of iQuest, which is a leading conference, exhibition and events company. We're formed in 2001, and we're now part of the Business Post group, and we run the events arm of that group. We currently have over 30 events each year, a mix of conferences, exhibitions, awards, ceremonies, and niche and specialist events. So in terms of where we are with the current situation, when Taoiseach kind of made the announcement on the 12th of March, essentially I closed up the office and the lights turned off overnight and haven't come back on yet, as probably a lot of the rest of us in this industry. I don't think any of us had any concept on that date as to how quickly and how far this would spread and the impact it would have on us and the industry. And as Sean said, the impact that the recession is going to have, that's going to come after it. You know, our incoming revenue stopped overnight, so there was a whole cash management piece. We had our next event due to take place on the 1st of April, which we postponed to later in the year. You know, delegates stopped booking tickets, sponsors asked to hold on invoices. It caused all the normal kind of problems that a lot of the rest of you are probably experiencing also. We made the decision at that point to cancel circa 35% of our events to begin with over the coming weeks. We moved another 25% of them into Q4, which was already a busy period for us. I suppose after the initial few weeks of crisis management and having to make some very difficult decisions, as a lot of businesses have had to make, we've turned to about planning for the future and analysing how we can adapt and, you know, increase our digital transformation during this period. We've moved some of our conferences online over the summer months to try and salvage some of the schedule. We've innovated, we're diversifying, but bearing in mind we're facing something here that we have never encountered before, and we don't know how it will react and how it will develop over the coming months. We're looking forward to Q4 of this year, where we're still planning to hold live conferences. We're obviously, it's a lot of factors that have to be taken into consideration there. Number one, will we be in a position to do that? You know, we're planning based on the current phasing out method that we're at. Everything is obviously in a state of flux, but we have to plan and adapt as we go. I suppose our major concerns, and at this point, are, you know, the fear of a second wave and the devastating impact if that was to come. The question of when the events will be able to happen again, how many delegates or guests will we be able to get into the space based on social distancing? Will the events be commercially viable with those new regulations for both the venues and for ourselves as an event organizer? And will companies or delegates, you know, will they be happy to attend events even if they're, you know, if we're allowed to legally? Will there be policies by business, you know, that's going to be extended into next year? That's obviously a going concern. And obviously the appetite for virtual streaming on an ongoing basis, is that something that we build in on an ongoing basis into our business model? And the big piece as well, which has come up, is managing, I suppose, you know, sponsors and their expectations and, you know, their investment with us through this period into the future. Where are we going to end up around that? So I suppose they're the major concerns we're facing, but we're remaining quite positive. A lot of our clients we're working with are quite positive looking at Q4. So I think we have to keep the positive but realistic stance on it and adapt as we go. So I think that's been set up from my side.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the toughest piece of this is the uncertainty. You know, you could cope with, all right, all events are gone until October or something, but then after that, you'll be able to rev up again. But it's not knowing how an event is going to be structured. So we'll be addressing that in some detail and that issue of sponsorship as well. So Susan Kirby, Chief Executive, St. Patrick's Festival. I mean, wow, you were right in the eye of the storm. The whole thing cancelled a few days' notice. So what are your thoughts on how we might go forward from here?
Yeah, morning. Thank you, Sarah. I think, yeah, absolutely. As you say, we really were in the eye of the storm. The 9th of March, the Taoiseach and CMO cancelled all major large gatherings, which effectively meant we lost 5 of our big figurehead events, which are really significant events. Everybody would be very familiar with the parade, but actually we run a number of large scale events which are all over the city. So they were stood down. We were already in build, similar to Sean mentioning earlier. We were already in build, so we stood all of that down. It was absolutely the right decision, by the way. Obviously, I think we then had our next tranche of cancellations on the 12th of March, which actually we cancelled the day we started, if you will, because the festival is almost a week-long festival. So it was very challenging. We actually had been in a crisis management period from really kind of February into March. We were a very high profile, widely debated event and cancellation, and that came with its challenges. I have to say, I suppose I would, kind of to pivot back to what you mentioned earlier, I am 100% in the positive fairy camp, if you will, in that to start at the end, I like to think that I'm starting with, yes, we are going to get this sector back up and work back from that. How do we achieve that? That is without doubt, without challenge, many challenges. But actually our experience has been that it was incredibly difficult, challenging, but also there were a lot of positives that came out of it. People have mentioned their sponsorship and partners and funders. Actually, we as a festival received incredible support, because it isn't until you are challenged that you realise that any entity, we all know, major events, festivals, they are the sum of their parts. They're not one entity that really delivers it. It is a team effort. It's a collegiate affair. So that was reflected back to us, that there was huge support for the sector, for the festival in particular. So we take a lot of comfort in that, and we're looking at that in terms of, okay, what does that mean for us as a festival going forward? Unfortunately, though, it is really important to say that our sector is essentially a connecting sector. So we are influenced and feed into tourism, hospitality, events, arts, culture, all of which are effectively arrested as sectors because of COVID-19. And it is enormously challenging. I feel that while we will be part of the solution and part of the recovery, that has to be done in almost a manner which is bringing all of those sectors along. So there is a buoyant sector, and all boats rise in that sense. But also as well that those sectors will be, while we have phased the close, we may also need to look at phasing the opening, if you will, in terms of the support that is available to those sectors. So those are the types of things we are looking at. If you will, we're considering two very distinct lines of the conversation. One being hearts and minds. How do people feel? What is confidence? What's the motivation? I completely concur with you. I believe that fundamentally we will look to connect as people again, in all that means, but also then practicalities of how do I deliver essentially a safe algorithm for all types of events, from small to large. People would probably know us as large scale major outdoor operators, which we are, but we also do small intimate events and happenings all over the city, and community led events. So we're really kind of spanning the sector in that sense. We're really aware as well. I see the festival as strategically important to the national agenda. It's an unprecedented opportunity for any country. And while I was very, struck positively about how incredibly the public reacted to it, and kind of, the debate that they had. I actually really welcomed the debate that happened, and things like RTE responding with a virtual parade really warmed, gave us a lot to comfort us. But I really do feel that this is a sector, a diverse, fragmented sector, but one that can really deliver recovery and part of the solution for Ireland Inc., if you will.
Okay, thank you, Susan. And just a reminder to everyone participating that you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen for questions. So next we go to Graham Slattery, Senior Managing Director at Teneo. And Graham, of course, has a very long history and his career is in consumer brand management. So I think it's very relevant. Graham, what are your thoughts on how we think we can survive, even in the short to medium term? What kind of solutions might be useful?
Okay, well, thanks, Sarah. Just a little bit of context. So Teneo is a global communications and advisory firm, and we focus predominantly on the C-suite, but as part of our business in Ireland, we do a lot of brand communications work for both Irish and international brands. And within that, we do a lot of brand launches and experiential work. So lots of events for media and influencers and members of the public. And just for clarity, in our business, we work in conjunction with events producers and production companies to help implement our creative vision and deliver high-end events for our clients. Because Teneo is quite multifaceted, we've done well to weather the storm so far, but needless to say, we've had to cancel a lot of events. And in terms of what the future holds from our perspective, look, I think really it comes down to the big question of how do we replicate the physical event experience as closely as possible if we're going to be online for the foreseeable future. And we're looking at kind of, I suppose, two terms. One, the immediate term, which is now probably through the end of the year and quite possibly into 2021, where for the most part online only, with what we call interactive experiences and physical product delivery to attendees in advance is probably where it's at. But I've seen a lot of these already, and I think there's a number of issues that need to be ironed out. One particular one is human connection is lacking. So what I've seen so far is more broadcasting than interacting. And I think what we need, if we're going to continue this, is a digital platform that really drives face-to-face engagement like we're doing now, but at a mass scale, not just sit back and watch. Leaning in is vitally important. And then secondly, it's really difficult for online attendees to experience the product and the brand. So if they can't come to the event, we need to bring the event to them. And that means delivering everything from products to food, beverages, etc., which is going to be very costly for brands. That means limiting the attendees online. It probably also means running a series of events across successive nights and days to build up that reach that we would typically get in a physical environment. When we look then at the medium term, I think what we're looking at is more kind of hybrid events where we're connecting smaller, localized physical events where social distancing is possible out to a much wider audience through online streaming. And I think what we'll see in that is more all-day, daytime events where the small groups and physical settings that are rostered throughout the day. But for big major international launches, which we've been a part of, such as global car launches, etc., where the Geneva Motor Show ceased to happen this year, I think that, look, it's going to be difficult. For us, we rely heavily on media. They're very unlikely to travel, certainly not out of the country. And I think, look, there's a number of watch-outs for brands. Number one is, an interesting one, a first mover disadvantage. It's always been the case where first mover advantage was something you'd go for. But what brands are going to raise their heads above the parapet potentially in a physical environment? I think insurance is going to be a major issue, as well as contracts. So what do force majeure clauses look like in this? What do cancellation terms look like? And I think when it comes down to it, venues and event producers, I think, are really going to have to work together and share the burden. Otherwise, brands are going to be very reticent to roll the dice.
Okay, well, we might come back to that risk sharing and that insurance issue, because I know that is a major issue. Monica O'Byrne, Director of Sales and Marketing, Clayton Hotel, Burlington Road. Look, the Burlo is a famous venue, Monica. And So what are the Dalat and Clayton thoughts on how you're going to manage events there?
Well, first of all, good morning. And Sarah, I should say, much as we'd like to be, I don't think we're the largest conference hotel in Ireland, but certainly in Dublin City.
In Dublin, okay.
Yeah. So In terms, I suppose, just again, just an overview on the Burlington, as it was, the Clayton Hotel Burlington Road. Our business is international conference business, large association business, predominantly coming from North America, Europe, UK. It's booked well in advance, and COVID hit, and so obviously all of that has cancelled. Certainly for 2020, there's still a little bit of business hanging on to the end of 2020, but we'll have to wait and see. And I think, as other people have mentioned, the uncertainty is one of the things here. What's going to happen? How is it going to happen? Our current situation would be that we are working with all of the bookers and organisers to move events, and work with them, as Graham was saying there, from a financial point of view as well, so that we get things moved. Because a conference is booked for May 2020 doesn't mean necessarily it can just move to May 2021, because these conferences booked so far in advance. They could be going to Barcelona already for next year, and you're talking about 2022. So there's a lot of settling down to be done in terms of all of that yet. I suppose we see certainly the end of 21 and into 22 looking good. Again, being positive about it, the willingness is there, people want to do it. It's not that conference and events is over, it's just put on hold a little bit and move forward. But because of the uncertainty, it's very difficult to make decisions. So what needs to happen now is all of the directives need to be clarified, and it's difficult to get that clarification, I know, but that needs to happen. So 1 metre versus 2 metre social distancing, as somebody's already mentioned, is huge. Like, that has a huge impact on numbers and everything else to do with events. Airline access, when are they going to start? How are the numbers going to be? What airlines are going to be there? What routes are going to be there? Because if people are going to come to Ireland for events, they got to get here. We're working at the moment on the whole hygiene thing, and I think that's where it's difficult and challenging. It's something we can do. We know what needs to be done for that, and so implementing all of those effective changes and documenting all of that, because those bookers and conference organisers need accredited documentation to say that venue is going to be safe for people to come to. So we're sort of working on that. And then in terms of what we do in the interim, you know, it's all about flexibility. So we come from a very resilient, creative, enthusiastic, hardworking industry, and it's all about just making it happen. And you can hear that from everybody talking already. It's not will it, it's when will it. And so we're just looking at doing different things. So in terms of what do our customers need currently, it's probably about virtual and online. So we're looking to work with some of our other suppliers in terms of different facilities. So for instance, the studio at the Clayton Hotel Burlington Road would be a high quality, high tech studio that a CEO and his board members could come into, socially distanced, do presentations all around the world to offices, and as Graham was talking about, have 100 delegates jumping in and out and interacting, you know, so it's a little bit like a real conference. The other thing that we're looking at is the virtual site inspection. So an agent would normally fly over, have a look, see what they think. We're trying to do that virtually. It's working quite well. We've actually had a conference confirm on the basis of a virtual site tour, so that's great. So really, where we're at the moment is keeping up with what's happening and being as flexible as we can, trying to stay on the curve, if not ahead of it, and do what we can to meet the needs as they happen.
Okay, thank you, Monica. Sean, if I can come back to you, you know, so let's say in the medium term, even maybe the next 8 to 12 months, we're talking about socially distant events. How commercially viable is a physical event if you have to keep 1 meter or 2 meters apart, and how significant could different guidelines be?
Well, obviously I can really only speak for exhibitions, but you can see how important that is, and what an impact it has when you have conference delegates or people at seated events. But for the exhibition scene, if you take, for example, our Ideal Home Show, which is now postponed to our October date, we have put together protocols that allow for 4 square meters per person in the hall. Now, if you take Simmons Court, it's 12,000 square meters. So on that basis, you would accommodate 3,000 people in the hall at any one time. There might be 1,000 exhibitors and 2,000 visitors. And the plan is to ensure that everyone registers in advance. Most do anyway, whether they buy a ticket or they have a complimentary registration, but that they also register for a time to arrive. So you've picked the hour you're going to arrive. So we can stagger and manage the arrival times. We will have probably 4 entrances with into the hall with heat scanning, sanitation kits, paramedics, all there. Social distancing, which again, 1 meter would be so much easier than 2, even at that aspect of it. But from that point of view, we're a bit like going to the supermarket. The numbers can be managed. They can even be managed more easily than the supermarket because we can register and control the time people attend. We can also record it, the time they attend. So from a follow-up perspective, we can say we know that you arrived at the hall at 1:20 because you scanned your barcode at that time. So that would help with contact tracing if the need arose. So the big challenge, of course, is selling the stand space, which for us is where most of the income comes. And while we have a postponed event, which we are holding together, and it's in the bag for October, as I said earlier, I'm concerned about next year. I don't know, I'm delighted to hear there's a conference booked into the Burlington, but I don't know of any organizers like ourselves, exhibition organizers, who've sold any stand space properly confirmed in the last couple of months. And I just don't know when it's going to start. And we're planning to do an email out the next week or two for the autumn event to start selling stand space again. But you know,
yeah, and I suppose
right.
that goes to the point Graham was making about first mover. Is it going to be an advantage or disadvantage? Because there's some brands have had a great opportunity to step up in the crisis, like on Post and say Croke Park. They're going to be represented in the second panel here today. But still, if you moved in and sponsored an event and then there was an infection breakout, obviously there'd be concern about that. Graham, I want to come back to you though on something else you mentioned, and we have a question from Paul Slevin, and he's saying, how is the industry feeling regarding digital events? My guys and clients are zoomed out. Physical contact is key, and there's a boredom factor, talking about the digital platform. So you mentioned in your thoughts at the beginning that it shouldn't just be about leaning back and watching, that we need to get people to lean in. What kind of things would help that?
Yeah, well, look, I think what we're doing now is great, and it's a good example. But look, the reality is that there was a novelty factor when we all started working from home, and that's out the window very much now. I think we all spend so much time just staring at, for me, a little green light on my computer, which signifies a camera, and I'm on. But our days are just completely enveloped in that. So yeah, look, it feels old already. In a situation where, like what we're doing now, like I believe there's perhaps maybe 400 or 500 people watching this, and aside from being able to type in questions, which is great, and get those answered, I think we are missing that human connection. Like, events are hugely about networking, and spending time with our fellow peers, meeting new people, and for what we do as well, it's massively important to be able to showcase products, get them into the hands of people. So, I don't know yet of a kind of technology system that you would open up to 600 people and be able to manage in a way where people can feel like they have that. So I'm not sure the answer is there. As I said in my kind of opening comments, look, I think it's going to be a blend of this, where we're looking at smaller numbers and we're repeating and we're rostering and we're doing physical events, albeit in quite small ways. I don't think that currently what we have online from a tools point of view is the answer. But look, I think we're getting to, August 15th is only around the corner. And certainly, I think we will see some of these smaller events happening, and I think there'll be lots of learnings from them. We'll see who's brave enough to go first. But there's no perfect silver bullet on this one yet.
And so on that, a lot of questions, understandably wondering, when do we think we will get back to normal? Damien Fee from Nomadic Display, and Sue O'Neill from Shell Cove, and maybe I might put that to Susan Kirby, because Susan, I imagine you're in touch with the government, a lot, because St. Patrick's is such a national event. What conditions do you think will be necessary that have to be fulfilled before there can be a return to normality? Because, a lot of people are making the point that this started out as a medical crisis, but it's really a political crisis, because politicians are having to make a call. And if they get the call wrong, wrath will be visited upon them. So while there's huge pressure to get the economy back on track, I think they're very conscious that if there's a second surge or a second wave, they will be held personally liable for people getting sick and God forbid dying again. So
yeah,
what do you think is your outlook?
Okay, so yeah, my observation actually in the period February to March, there was everybody, the world and its mother became very associated with the term risk assessment, whereas it may be in our day-to-day kind of vocabulary. My mother was asking me about how did I think the risk assessment was going to turn out, and it was at that level that it was being constantly pointed towards. We as a team had quite significant engagement with the Office of Taoiseach's Department of Health, and hats off to them for it. But I suppose a couple of things. My observation on that would be that actually there's an onus and a responsibility on the sector now, and I say that in the broadest term because it is a broad church, to assist government and to feed into the plans for reopening. And that has been the case. There's a lot to be learned from other sectors as well. That is very much what's happened with construction, retail. As they have opened, they are in active engagement. And I know there's panelists here and myself and on the later panels as well who are very active in that space. But there's a couple of I suppose, pieces in that. The construction, farming, agribusiness, different entities, they are well established. They have a deep kind of rooted establishment and representation. And maybe that's something that this has shown us. Does this, and I say it again, the sector, and that could be everybody from the breadth that you have on this panel, are they represented as a collegiate group which can formulate an agenda, if you will, and assist in a very meaningful way into government in restoring the sector? I know, there's been incredible amount of kind of contact and people networking in the last number of weeks and reaching out and trying to figure out how are we going to, what are we in? How do we assess what's happened? How do we look for contact with government and decision makers? So a lot of that is happening. I would like to think that a positive legacy from all of this will be a well-formulated representative body. There's a number of them. From our side, as I say, we sit within tourism, we sit within culture and arts, we sit within the event sector. So there's a number of different entities, the Event Industry Association. You have Paul Davis speaking later, who's representing a number of the commercial entities and events. I think that now is the time we really need to actually join the dots around all of the different conversations that are happening and present something to government, which is solutions that we are feeding into. Because if it is the case, if you will, that everybody's talking about 2 meters being an issue. 2 meters certainly is an issue, and obviously 1 meter is a lot more favourable for people. But actually, from an event a control point of view, so taking it out of allowing the event to go ahead and it being viable, you receive an event license or you can open your doors. You then have to look at enforcement, and actually that's where the real challenge lies. So you can look at staggering times and having space, but you actually have to modify people's behaviours. And we've all seen, a bit of good weather and everybody starts to, kind of change their behaviours. And so actually enforcement is a space that we need to look at. So you're really looking at a really diverse skill space there, from the salesperson who brings somebody from their home, wherever that might be here in Ireland or it might be internationally, right through to their journey to your door, their experience at your event, and then how they leave. That is the entirety of the actual challenge. I fundamentally believe that this is the sector that can answer that challenge. Formats like this are really interesting and really valuable in terms of starting the conversation. So that would be my contribution there, Sarah. I think it's an opportunity for us to feed into the decision makers around how we can open the sector, if you will, because we are the ones with the knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Sarah Murphy, would you like to address the issue of sponsorship and the concern that sponsors might have about being associated with events that then might be the center of a potential future outbreak? How do you give them confidence? And that point that Graham was making about contracts, force majeure and risk sharing, what do you think will be the outcome of that debate?
Well, I think for us, I suppose communication with our sponsors is key here, or people that we are looking to engage in. It's sharing, as Sean alluded to there as well, you know, the safety procedures and the health and safety that we're going to put in place, and that we're going to work with the venues that we're engaging with to put in place. I don't think we can judge fully yet where the sponsorship piece is going to fall when the die are rolled in terms of the level of engagement from sponsors, particularly in the first few months when doors open, if that's later this year. Having said that, we would have very strong relationship with a huge amount of our sponsorship base, and there's a huge element of trust with some of the brands we would work with, and we've been working with for over 20 years on some events. And when we talk through the procedures that we are going to put in place, and we, you know, engage with, whether it's Crow Park or Clayton Hotels or wherever it is, there is an element of trust that there will be enough of health and safety procedures put in place that if they are to come on board, that we will be doing all the next right things, and the heat monitoring and all that side of things. So, you know, it's a whole new area we're moving into there with it, but we're quite confident that we should be able to work with our sponsors to make sure all the boxes are ticked for them to get involved with an event. We're very much so looking at the virtual side of our events, even if when the live events are to take place later this year. We previously wouldn't have had the option for people to buy a delegate pass to tune into the entire thing virtually. We're now investing in the system to make that possible, so that if we can only have, you know, 200 people instead of 600 people in a room that we would normally have had, that we can have the other 400 and maybe many more engaging, tuning in virtually. And we're looking at with our sponsors how they are represented, how they're branded on that. We are working on bringing in a platform at the moment that I think Graham touched on it briefly, and it's not the same as being in the room with people, but we're looking at bringing in a system which enables all of our sponsors to have virtual exhibition booths. It does nearly matchmaking between sponsors and delegates virtually. It sets up one-to-one meetings between them at the conference during the day. So that's a system that we're bringing in to use on some of the events we're doing over the summer period, but we're also going to carry that through to all of our live events. So that, yeah, there might be numbers might be more restricted in the room. Sponsors might be worried about not having too many people in the room from a health and safety perspective, and also the image of that. But how do they get the value and the ROI on the spend that they're putting into that event if numbers are down? And so for us, ensuring that we can work on a hybrid style event, as Graham mentioned, you know, where there is a strong virtual element as well as the power of the live event that is in the room. And so I think that's how we hope to manage it and keep the sponsors engaged.
Okay, and just to let participants know that we have had some questions directly to the panelists, and we can pass those on directly to them afterwards, and they'll get back to you. We're coming towards the end of this particular session, and I wanted to put a question to Sean Lemass. Sean, since you are one of the elders of the industry, if that doesn't offend you, you know, you've lived and survived through a lot of recessions and a lot of crises, just in terms of people's personal resilience and getting through this. Are there any tips that you might like to give to people, and, you know, how to hunker down and get through this?
For sport, I'm a sailor, you know, and I don't do it so much now, but I used to hunt, ride horses. And I always think that when you're in a difficult situation, it's about confidence. If you're intimidated by the situation, you're in real trouble. You need to keep a cool head. You need to look at it pragmatically, but I think you need to be realistic. But look, we will get through this. We will come to an end. The thing is to limit the damage and to try and see where the opportunities lie. And I suppose from the beginning of running exhibitions, we've always looked for growth areas. We ran in our first event was materials handling, and it was at a time of palletization. It was called MoveX, and Phil Simmons scored in 1977, and it got us started. But then we went on to electronic manufacturing, Computex, when the computer industry was developing, and right through different sectors, food processing, all chemical, pharmaceutical industry, production equipment, and which we did in Cork. And now we're really focused on consumer events, because there has been a consumer boom in Ireland for the last 15 years, probably. So there are particular areas now which we're looking to in the future with perhaps if this coalition comes together, there'll be opportunities for retrofitting in houses. So we will build that part of our Ideal Home Show. We already have content in all that, but we will focus on where the growth and the opportunities lie. As I was saying to you earlier, we'd love to see support though for SMEs, because we know already that many of our exhibitors are struggling just from a cash flow perspective. So finding the deposit and the payment, which you have to take in advance for an exhibition stand, is a struggle for them. And if we could see some schemes, say from Enterprise Ireland, to help Irish SMEs get back in the marketplace, they will get a tenfold return. Companies don't exhibit in shows, trade shows, consumer shows, for fun. They do it for a return, and they need that business now more than ever. So we're hoping to contact Enterprise Ireland. I was hoping they might be on the panel today to see if we can get a response. But I think there could be an opportunity there to try and help kickstart a business across all sectors.
And actually, on that point, and Fergus Dunn has made a comment, you know, when Susan raised that point about this industry not having the same deep ties with government that, say, agriculture might have. And he says that Susan has just pinpointed the main problem for our sector. So we're going to address that in our next panel, because some of our guests there are on this and are putting together stuff for the government. So I think I will wrap up this one now, and we'll take a few seconds to organise the next one. So I just want to thank Sean Lemass, Sarah Murphy, Susan Kirby, Graham Slattery, and Monica O'Byrne. And so if you guys switch off your videos and that, and our next panel will set up. So guests, please stay with us. Give us about 10 to 15 seconds. Oh, does someone want to say something there?
No, just saying thank you, Sarah.
Oh, thank you, Susan. Lovely to hear from you. And and we'll have our second panel organised in a minute, and we'll address some of your questions that have been coming in and issues on insurance and that government piece. So stay with us. Do I have everybody? I think I do. So we will kick off. So welcome to panel 2 of Pivot, the Future of Events. And joining us now for another 40 minutes of some insights and thoughts on the future of events with this COVID-19 crisis. We have Mark Dorman, Head of Stadium Business at Croke Park. And obviously they've been very much in the centre of the crisis as well. The stadium has been used for testing. Nicola McGrain is the Chief Executive Officer of CPI, Conference Partners International. Sonia Thomas is the Chief Operations Officer of UFI, the Global Association of the Exhibition Industry. And Paul Davis is the CEO of Davis Events, and Mark Corliss, General Manager of CAVS, a company that I'm sure is known to you all. So Mark Dorman, I'll kick off with you if you want to give us a few minutes of your thoughts on how we might start holding events in the medium and indeed long term in our new world.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Sarah. Yeah, well, I suppose starting 2020 was lining up to be the best year we'd have ever had for meetings and events here in Croke Park. And we now look like we're going to be moving back a number of years. So it's been a fairly sobering couple of months. We moved initially from thinking that this was Q2 moving to Q3. We're now thinking, and we don't know, but it's moving to Q4, it's moving to Q1, and it's moving in 21, and it's moving beyond that as well. So we've all had a different account every day of what the future looks like. But what we do know is the recovery is a bit further away than we thought it was going to be at first. Physical distancing, and it's already been mentioned on the previous panel, it's one of the biggest challenges we all face, and how to hold events in which we're all safe. Venues such as Croke Park, on our big days we can hold 82,000 people, so we've lots of space. So we naturally allow for social distancing. And like many of you, we spent the first few weeks looking and watching almost hopelessly as events cancelled and postponed. The last month has been time invested in how we can run events, how we can get back, look at events, indeed matches safely as well, coming up with protocols, working out our capacities, doing revised menus, all of that sort of thing. Obviously here, we're used to dealing with large volumes of people coming, entering and leaving in a short window, and we're well equipped because we have lots of entrances. We've escalators to all our levels. Escalators naturally allowed for social distancing, so there are some advantages in that straight out. But obviously social distancing does bring problems for capacities in rooms. So the Hogan Suite here would hold 750, maybe 800, with social distancing using the WHO's guidelines, which is the ones we're using at the moment, but that's just to work out things. That brings us down to maybe 200, 210. So I suppose that's, and actually you can look at those, by the way, also on 3D. So if you want to take a virtual tour, we're going to have those up very shortly. But obviously that's where we're going to have to pivot to tech for now. We have a retailer who would normally have an event here every October. It's a gala awards dinner. So what they're doing now is they're going to use Croke Park. They're going to use what's been referred to as the hub and spoke. So Croke Park will be the hub. There'll be 200 people here, and then there'll be at the spoke events, whether that's 50 people in Sligo, 30 people in Limerick, 20 in Cork, all tuning in at the same time. The retailer obviously wants to provide, and Graham would have mentioned earlier about brands, but in this case it's where the retailer wants to provide assurance to its staff that business is continuing. So by bringing the event back here, it is showing that continuity, albeit it's in a hybrid manner, but that's what needs to happen. So we're working our tech partners here, Avcom, in terms of developing options such as live streaming of events. And I suppose we've all been forced to adapt fast and consider the options for communicating and engaging with audiences. And in the short term, we're looking solely to digital, virtual streaming of solutions to bridge the gap. We're currently working on streaming solutions with a walk-in studio, featuring staging, design solutions, integrating LED displays, modular structures, green stream, AVR. And while they'll bridge the gap, they don't fill or replace live events. So as a venue, I'm not obviously here to endorse tech. That's like turkeys and Christmas or whatever it might be for vegetarians. You know, we're here as a venue and as other venues. You know, we're bringing people together. It's the sharing of information. It's the inspiration. You know, we all know when we go to events, it's about the journey. It's about the food. It's about the conversations. It is about the setup, all of that. And Graham would have referenced that earlier. And there's an energy in the room, and it's hard to replicate that in your bedroom or in your spare room, wherever you're tuning in today. But for now, we have to pivot to tech, and we have to look at those hybrid events. Now, that they have existed for 20 years, and everybody's talking about this being the new normal. But it is going to be the new normal for the next while, because people are going to be challenged, and we've heard it earlier about whether people will feel safe about traveling, international visitors and indeed domestic visitors, whether they want to be in even with social distancing and all the assurances that venues like ours are going to provide. So for now, that's the direction that we're working in.
Thank you, Mark. And I know there was a question in from a participant about that. You know, how can we make guests feel comfortable about actually traveling? And unfortunately, that's probably a matter, you know, for the government and the World Health Organization, that we have to rely on them for that go ahead. We'll go now to Nicola McGrain, CEO of CPI Conference Partners International. And Nicola, I think you had some comments you could make in response to people's queries about connections with the government and government supports and all of that. So if you want to include that in your opening comments, it might be helpful.
Good morning, Sarah, and good morning to everyone who's online. We can't see you, but we know you're there. And I want to start by just congratulating Sarah Murphy for getting us all together. I think bringing the private sector together is really critical right now to finding our solutions for survival, recovery, and hopefully growth eventually. So just in context, I bring in international, large-scale international meetings into Ireland and around Europe in the academic and medical field. Our other brand, Event Partners Ireland, we bring in a lot of suppose, incentive travel into Ireland, high-end incentive travel. So we've had a very interesting journey over the last 9 weeks. Both businesses are quite different and behaviour is very different with our customers. On the PCO side, the professional conference management side, you know, immediately we started postponing conferences till the end of the year or early next year. And we've now moved 2 and 3 times on both sides of the businesses. So we really feel our recovery is probably 1 to 1.5 years away, and that most conferences now are moving into July or even November 2021. So that in itself has, I'm trying not to be too negative here this morning, but our main issue is cash flow, to be honest, because not just cash flow to retain our amazing teams, talented teams that we've built up over the years, but in the association meeting sector, we have a lot of NGOs, charities, societies who don't have money. So we as PCOs, we support them in prepaying deposits for hotels and venues. So with no revenue coming in for registrations or sponsorship, that won't come in probably till another year. So that's our biggest challenge, is in keeping our doors open, is cash flow. Cash is king right now. And I don't want to labour the point about the physical distancing. That's another huge problem for us. And to put it into context, for conferences we have in the CCD, 1,000-seater room takes 150 delegates. So you've got the expenditure of the venue, but you only have the revenue of 150 people. So our big concern, and I speak for all PCOs through the Association of Irish PCOs as well, is that we're concerned that those conferences that have postponed into next year may cancel again because they're just not financially viable. But what's been really interesting, I think, for probably a lot of us is, you know, when all of this hit, you get into the trenches and you cut your costs and you say, oh my God, how am I going to survive? But the interesting part is it's a time also to get out of the trenches and for us all to start reinventing ourselves. And what my amazing team have done is spent the last 8 weeks looking at large-scale virtual meetings, and they're very different to even this platform here, where we've got our first one now in August with 7,000 delegates and over 100 exhibitors and sponsors. And trying to create that live event online has been our focus, and just that's our way of reinventing ourselves to keep the doors open. On the corporate incentive travel, behaviour is very different because a lot of our clients are from the US market. And our team are having to nearly push them to make the decisions. They're not in the same mindset as we are here. So again, they've been moved 2 or 3 times into next year now. So, you know, I think what we're trying to do there is to keep the momentum going as we're doing our site inspections virtually. The team have been very creative in doing, you know, Irish baking online and fun stuff like that, just to keep Ireland first, because what's going to happen now is that all European cities and destinations want to be the most competitive right now. So it's really important that we don't just fix our problems, we continue to showcase the brand of Ireland. But just finally, just to sum up, I think the biggest challenge we all have is that to deliver really top-class international events, we have amazing members in our team who've been with us for many years, and that experience, we need to retain that to get back to recovery and to get back to growth. And again, that's why we really do need that support from government. We need support for SMEs. I know Sean brought that up earlier. We need a business survival fund. We need the wage subsidy scheme to be extended, and we need immediate liquidity measures to be put in place just to keep our doors open and to retain those amazing people.
Thanks, Nicola, and I'll come back to you on that and what you and your colleagues are doing about that in lobbying government for those supports. But we'll go now to Sonia Thomas, COO of UFI, the Global Association of the Exhibition Industry. You're very welcome, Sonia. Thank you for joining us. And Sonia, perhaps you could give us some oversight of what's happening around the world and the different kinds of supports perhaps the governments are offering and the different initiatives that industries in other countries are working on right now.
Right, thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you very much for inviting me, and it's really, really nice to be back in Ireland virtually. Just for information, I'm based in Paris, so let me tell you first a little bit about UFI. We have almost 800 members in 80 countries, the majority of which are exhibition organisers and venues, but we also have industry associations, service providers, universities, etc. And we're hopefully currently bringing in the Irish Exhibition Organiser Association, because we work closely to support all our members, and particularly through the association. So it's very helpful in reaching and increasing our reach as an association. Now, the exhibition sector has been particularly badly affected by the coronavirus, as all trade shows have been prohibited in many of the countries across the globe. However, exhibitions are crucial for economic recovery. They're a really, really important marketplace for companies, and in particular for SMEs. And I think you've got something like 250,000 SMEs in Ireland alone. Just to give you an idea, there are 3.2 million people currently employed worldwide by the exhibition industry, and the industry represents a total economic output of 275 billion euros. So many governments and all governments and local stakeholders must help enable exhibitions and conferences and congresses to take place again. Shows are starting to take place. For example, in China, we've had several. In South Korea, a company called Kintax did a show not so long ago. And many German states are now relatively competent to be able to restart exhibitions from Q3 onwards. So that's all very, very good news. What's interesting in Germany as well is that exhibitions have been differentiated from other mass gatherings. So, which is good for the industry, and many states have now given their go-aheads for conferences and exhibitions to take place. Also, just quick mention, we have the State Council in China, and they've also given their go-ahead for exhibitions to go ahead. In France, all gatherings of more than 5,000 people have been banned until the end of August, so we're watching that very, very closely. Just for information as well, that we have produced, I saw some questions in the Q&A in terms of what to do, hygiene measures, etc. UFI has produced a global framework that we're using to help to lobby stakeholders and governments, and we're working on a guide that will enable shows to take place whilst also ensuring that the necessary sanitary precautions are in place to keep people safe. That guide will be ready hopefully next week sometime, and it's also valid for venues, and it's also valid for congresses. So just watch out for that. I also wanted to maybe give some examples of government support. There's government support, for example, I noted in Germany, there's fiscal stimulus to the tune of 750 billion euros. Combined for the German nation. In France, there's 1.2 billion euros of solidarity funds. There are schemes going on right now in Thailand, in Hong Kong, Albania. Much of the money is coming from the EU as well. So I think you should really be starting to, as a country, get yourselves organised to start to knock on the door of the EU.
Okay. Thank you, Sonia, and I will have some more questions for you on that. But we'll go now to Paul Davis, CEO of Davis Events, and Paul, on that issue of the sector coming together and how you can act as a collective, perhaps I think you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you, Sarah, and thanks to Sarah Murphy and the Business Post for getting us together here today. That's one thing that struck me from the very start. I think is everybody has started to come together, although there hasn't been formal structures across some of our sectors. I mean, we're in the corporate brand activation, employee engagement space, and we also organise and manage large outdoor events in the civic space, so above that 5,000 licensed event number. So a lot of our events obviously have been cancelled and postponed. Some of them moved into the last quarter, some of them getting kicked on again now. And as a business, we've been working with our clients to come up with protocols to safely figure out if, when and how to get back into the live space. And also then obviously digital and technologies form is a huge part of the interim solution, I think. As other people said, we're working with our clients, getting them virtual, getting them online, digital, hybrid events, that kind of thing, which is really important. And there's lots of technology there. But so a lot of the companies have come together in this space and formed Event Industry Ireland, and there's a website there, eventindustryIreland.ie, and it's open to anybody to get involved in and to come together. And it's really, I guess, companies in the industry collaborating to try and, help government, come to government, help government, and engage to find a roadmap forward, in the interim to get the supports there flowing that'll help to keep the industry going, but also in the longer term to restart this sector of the economy. Because, we all know that like what we bring to the party is the party, like that a lot of other sectors rely on the events industry for their survival and the economy, you know, where people travel to Ireland for events, pubs, B&Bs, bus drivers around the country, taxi drivers, all of those kinds of, and the, you know, hospitality, cultural and tourism sectors. They all really lean on the event sector, and we're kind of an invisible, silent operator within the whole fabric of that. So, I mean, it's important that we do come together and that we, you know, outline what our issues are, I guess, and try and, you know, negotiate and discuss those with government and get involved in the solution, because we're creative companies and we have the solutions. You know, we can use technology, but we're still dealing with real people. So the really important thing, I think, is like virtual events are fantastic. It's a lot of fun. A lot of what has been said there. It's a good way to keep our people motivated as well and to keep relationships with clients. But you know, people always want to come together and share those real experiences and make real memories in a real live room. So the live audience is really the critical thing that we're focused on trying to get back to. And so it has to be solutions focused. And so we want to work with government, but also with the rest of the sector. We're also putting together a code of practice for how events might come, like people come back online in the live space. People talked about the social distancing rules and the numbers. They are important. And I think the numbers will reduce from 2, maybe 1.5, 1 meter. Everybody is looking at that and analyzing that. And I think we can start to use, initially the technology will be around testing, access control, monitoring, controlling the admission, I think, of audiences into rooms and spaces. But we can move on and then look at behavior, how people respond. And then we can probably tweak all the rules a little bit if we can get under the skin of people's behavior at events and help them, you know, come at different times, manage transport, manage egress, manage how people move around. Will they stay in their small group that they've pre-selected to come in that small group? Or do they, you know, move around to different spaces? So those are things that we need to work on as time unfolds and as we can start in smaller events and get into bigger events, hopefully. But it's going to be a while. The initial solution is going to be a health one. And until we get there, I think we need to do everything we can, and working together, I think, is a critical part of that. And I think lastly, confidence from these things will help, I think, confidence from attendees, but also from our clients. A lot of people have said it earlier on, clients are nervous, there's brand exposure there, there's brand equity there. So it's really important that as an industry, we come together and we try and make people feel more secure and safe at the events, and then give that confidence to our clients to come back into the market. So I think all those things together will help us get back to where we used to be ultimately, eventually.
Thanks so much, Paul. And I'm really glad you made that point about the trickle-down effect of the events industry. You know, you can say events and it sounds like some small little sector that's over here. But when you consider all that knock-on business that goes throughout the entire economy, as you said, even transport, you know, alone is just one small area affected by events. I don't think it's too much of an exaggeration to say we're in a too big to fail situation, which does put the pressure on the government to actually get in there and find adequate supports for it. So thanks, Paul. So we'll move on now to our final speaker of the day, Mark Corliss, General Manager of CAVS. And Mark, your particular perspective, of course, I think is very important, because I'm interested to know how, you know, these digital events, you know, might affect your business in particular, because I'm sure you're more heavily reliant on physical ones, you know, like venue owners would be. So what are your thoughts on where we might be going next?
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for that. I'd like to start by saying that the impact on our business has been devastating. You know, over a 2-week period in early March, pretty much every email and phone call we received was a cancellation or a postponement for every upcoming event, and which meant that unfortunately we've had to let about 80% of our people go. Now, our Dublin and Cork offices are still open, and we are still working on small events. You know, we've had some TV work with Operation Transformation programs. We're doing some outdoor projection at the hospitals for their social media campaigns, projecting messages of support for the frontline workers. And we've also started streaming events. We've done some community events, and sadly we've even done some funeral services for people who have passed away during this difficult time. So overall, it's a very different landscape for events compared to what we would normally do. I suppose looking to the future, we're going to need to adapt our business model until the restrictions lift and we can get back to doing live events with our audiences. You know, video streaming used to make up about 5% of our work. Now it looks like that figure might be closer to 95% of our work for the next few months, at least anyway. One of the things we're doing at the moment with the conference and events team in the Mansion House is creating a professional studio space where we will be able to stream online conferences and meetings for companies trying to replicate a live event. We've also invested in new equipment and new software, so we'll be able to, offer in-house a complete package to customers who are trying to upload a streaming event. I think virtual events will never replace the success of a live event. However, at the moment, they are a useful alternative during the lockdown. So not every event can be moved onto a virtual platform, but where possible, I think companies should investigate the opportunities that may be available to them. In the same way that musicians and bands are, staying in contact with their fans by performing on their social media platforms, companies should stay in contact with their customers by hosting a virtual event of some description. Unfortunately, a huge number of people have temporarily lost their jobs, and not just our AV technicians, but so many people that work in the events chain. Event planners, event staff, venue staff, decor companies, lighting companies, content creators, wedding planners, chefs, catering, bands, DJs, the list goes on and on down. So it's just endless, the amount of people that are reliant on the events business. And, in a strange way, we all work together to deliver great events for our clients.
Yeah, and actually on that, Mark, I know the goal behind the wage subsidy was that the government were very conscious that once people break ties with a company, that relationship, can be ruined for a long time. But that's a much more difficult policy to implement in the events industry, where you've got so many subcontractors and self-employed people. So you're working together as teams all the time, but not necessarily in a straightforward employer and employee situation.
No, and when you think of the list of people that are in that chain, you would never, you might not associate our services with the services of a security company, or we don't think about the chefs in the kitchen who are, and the people that are serving the food. Every single person in the chain is reliant on the events industry for these jobs. So I think we need a clear and we need government guidance, and a clear roadmap on how and when we can get back to holding live events with decent numbers of people in a venue. I suppose that's what it comes down to, really.
Okay, well, look, thank you. And I'll put some of the questions now to you. Mark Dorman, if I can come back to you, Derval is asking, will venues, for example, Croke Park or the RDS, share any of the burden of costs for implementing proper health and safety and social distancing measures?
That's well, it's not part of our plan. Like that's a cost that we see that we'll be taking on as the venue. Obviously, if somebody's organising something and wants something beyond what we're putting in place, but we think what we're putting in place is very, very comprehensive, and will assure people that we can run events safely. Because I say there's matches at stake here for us as well. So it is. It's a plan that we've spent, I said, about a month at this stage, and it keeps changing. We've probably a daily call on it, and there's another aspect. It is expensive, and it's definitely going to be challenging. But we're here as a venue to run live events, and we need to make sure that we can get people back in here and that people feel safe when they come in here.
Dara Lynch from InvestNet asked earlier, what about the insurance implications? Have you been having much contact with your insurance companies as to how this all might roll out?
Well, we're as a venue, and as an organisation, we're self-insured. So we are the insurance company. So it's a little bit different. But we obviously we speak at a higher level as well, because again, if you take a match where there's going to be 20,000 people potentially, because that's the number we're looking at that we can actually accommodate at the moment. And it's certainly high on the agenda, but it isn't at the moment. It's not something that's a blocker.
I might put that to Nicola McGrain then. Have you had contact with insurance companies yet? Is there any sense from them as to how they intend to cope with events in a viral situation?
Yes, unfortunately, they do not insure communicable diseases. So, we've all invested hugely in taking insurance out for all of our conferences, but we're just not covered. It's a simple answer. There's nothing to say more about it. And even looking at insuring those events that have postponed into next year, we still can't get that insurance now. It's just they're not offering it.
So how do you operate then in that environment? Is that maybe another thing where you're hoping the government might be able to step in, or do you think you're just going to have to learn to run events without that safety net?
I think right now, I suppose my own personal way of getting through this is to be very patient and not to think too far ahead, because the mindset of clients, the mindset of all of us, it changes per month. So when you make a decision now, it can actually change just a week later. So I think for survival right now, we just need to handle it nearly one day at a time. And react in a very patient and compassionate way towards clients as well. But we do, to keep the doors open, we do need support from government. I can't stress this enough. You know, a lot of other countries are doing it. Sonia brought up there the 750 billion support fund from Germany. There's also a hardship and recovery grant fund in Scotland, you know, similar business tourism industry to ours. So my message today is that we have an amazing industry. Tourism in general, it's worth 9.3 billion. It's 265,000 jobs. I do want to mention ITIC as well, the Irish Tourism Industry Confederation. They are our voice to government. And let's not forget that. I think, Paul, the work you're doing is super. But ITIC are also doing tremendous work. And we need to put this message through ITIC that all of us do need that support to keep the industry at the same values as it is. And, you know, Paul rightly mentioned there how it trickles down to all of the entire supply chain of tourism. But let's not forget as well that large-scale conferences are not just economic impact into the country. They are also a platform to share the wonderful research and knowledge, the knowledge economy of Ireland. And that, you can't put a measure on that. You know, that brings in research funding from Europe, brings in research funding from other centres of excellence into Ireland. So it's not just the business, the tourism economic impact, it's also the knowledge impact.
Thank you. Sonia Thomas, you referred in your thoughts at the beginning to what was happening globally and that some events were beginning to start in China. Could you give us a bit more detail on how you see mass gatherings initially rolling out in Europe? When do you think they're going to start taking place again?
Yeah, sure. There's just two things I wanted to say first of all, because Mark said, I think you said, Mark, it'd be good to wait until the government gives us the go-ahead to actually start having events, etc. again. And I think that I'd look at it in a different way if I were you. I would say go to the government and say, okay, we've organised ourselves and we can hold events. We can actually go ahead. So that rather than having a passive stance towards the holding of different events, etc., then I think you should really get yourselves organised as an industry and make sure the events happen. That's my first point, if you don't mind. In terms of the, as I said as well, Germany is very much looking towards starting to hold large exhibitions, etc., from Q3. And
sorry, Sonia, sorry to cut across you there. Have they laid down particular social distancing protocols for those? Are they
absolutely.
Yeah,
exactly. And they've gone to the government with the information. This is what we can do. This is how we can protect people and make sure people come into these large events with no risk or limited risk. And we want the events to go ahead. And that's what we've been working on at UFI with the global framework and the guide, so people can use the guide and go to the government with the guide.
And you believe those are commercially viable?
I believe they're commercially viable. I think there's a debate right now within the exhibition industry as to whether should we go ahead and maybe hold a skeleton event, if you understand what I mean, or to wait until such a time we can hold the event properly, because obviously there are travel restrictions as well. So that's impacting attendance and visitors. So the debate's still open on that one, but I think you have to think very, very carefully about that.
Thank you. Paul, I just want to come back to you. Could you give us again the website address of that organisation, Irish Events Industry, for people? Because obviously I think that's one of the main actions that's going to come out today is consolidation and organisation of members. So if you could give us a little bit more on that, please.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, so it's eventindustryireland.ie. And yeah, I mean, it's really, I suppose, about the collaboration of businesses in the sector. And I take on board absolutely what Nikki said there. It's really important. The work of ITIC is great. And I guess there are lots of wider companies who will all pull together and push in the same direction. And I think what Sonia was saying there is interesting, and that's a view. There are lots of smaller groups as well working in the industry to do different things. I mean, we're working on a code of practice that might feed into other people's work as well, as to how we can say, this is how we see an event happening when we do open an event. Like there may be events happening in August to September, and that it won't be government, I don't think, prescribing this is how we want to see an event happening. They'll expect us to come back to them saying this is within the guidelines. We understand and interpret what are the rules and the guidelines at the moment, and then we need to try and implement that. I heard Justin Green there last week talking, and he was talking about mass gatherings, the concept and the language. And again, you know, it's important for us to take control of our own industry, because we don't organize mass gatherings, no disrespect to anybody, but they sound like kind of unorganized, chaotic activities and that, you know what I mean, and probably illegal. And so for us, we organize professional events, and for a lot of our business events, professionals attend them. And there's nothing untoward or anything like that about our events. I mean, a lot of safety and protocols and everything, procedures go into them. And I think, you know, we need to start thinking like that. How do we want to be viewed? What do our events look like? And how are we going to get back to working the way we used to work?
Thanks, Paul. And I want to go back now to Mark Corliss. And Mark, digital events in the meantime, you know, a few people have commented, look, we're zoomed out. So just sitting here staring at your screen isn't exactly the most compelling thing in the world. So as you're going to be obliged now, you were saying 95% of your business could be online. You know, what ideas do you have to make them a little bit more engaging and interactive, so we're not so isolated and leaning back, as the phrase was used earlier?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all started using new technology. So like we're all using, you know, viewing this conference over Zoom, but you know, it's not great for you know, actual attending a conference. So, you know, I think we need to create spaces I think maybe every venue should create a space where they have almost like a studio, where you have good sound, good cameras, good lighting, good broadband, and let companies come in and put together a branded conference that looks like a natural extension of their profile. Going to have to shorten the events. You know, an 8-hour conference is not going to be possible on an online platform. So you're going to have to reduce that down maybe to a 2-hour offering for your delegates. I think Graham mentioned there that, you know, the idea that you would send out a delegate pack, perhaps, that would arrive at your house. So you sign up for an event, and you know, something might arrive at your house, whether it be programs, samples of food, or whatever was relevant to the event. Could be a really interesting way of just getting a little bit more reality onto the screen. So you're not just looking at a screen, but you have a product in your hand, and there's novel ideas, I suppose, that people are going to have to come up with and try in the short term, and to try and make conference a little bit more interesting.
The learning curve that we're all hearing about. Yeah. We're going to wrap up in a minute or two, so I want to put my final question to Nicola. Alex Stubb is a former Prime Minister of Finland, and I was watching a presentation he was giving a couple of weeks ago, and he said something that really struck with me. He said, as humans, we tend to over-rationalize the past, over-dramatize the present, and underestimate the future. And it really struck with me, because we know that the biggest mistake certainly Ireland made in terms of the financial crisis was underestimating the recovery. All the problems we've had over the last couple of years is because the economy just roared back far faster than anybody expected. So at the risk of putting the confidence fairy back into the debate, what do you think of that risk, that we'll be too cautious and let all our teams go, let people disperse, and suddenly there's a huge demand for events again? Let's say a vaccine comes out really quickly and unexpectedly.
Well, apparently I have the positivity disease. You might be asking the wrong person here. I am an optimist. They call me the Hoptimist. I even hop as I'm optimistic. Yes, and I was part of the Grow Dublin task force back in 2011, and I'm going to go back to just being very patient. We have to just sit with this and not panic. And this forum here, and, you know, setting up a recovery task force with the leaders in our industry is key right now. And there's a lot of work that we can do now that will leap us forward into that growth period. We had a talk with Fáilte Ireland yesterday through the Association of Irish Professional Conference Organisers, and we said the most resilient sector back in 2009, 2010, in the International Association Meetings market. Scientists, doctors, academics, societies, they've a global community. They will always want to meet face to face. So the work we do now in terms of really working towards business development for Ireland is key right now. Let's not stop that. And I do believe with the collective knowledge and experience of many wonderful professionals in Ireland, we can get back to growth, but we have to start now. You know, I talked earlier about getting into the trenches. It's perfectly understandable that we all get into the trenches and we are looking at survival and cutting costs and perhaps, you know, reducing our teams down. But we need to also consider, okay, how do we now think in a more positive way going forward in terms of growth? And this mindset change has, from the, whatever, I think it was the 18th of March when Leah Varadkar made that announcement, there was a huge shift in mindset change globally. Equally, with some positive news on a vaccine or on, you know, the right measures in terms of bringing, you know, our standard operating procedures for Brand Ireland, we get that right, a mindset can also change in a positive way. It can change very, very quickly. So I do think we need to be, one, very positive. We need to bring the right people around the table, and we need to tell our story in Ireland, how we are fantastic at what we do, and to give confidence to the global market. And that's how you change consumer behavior. So the work we do now in putting out our message to the world, that we know what we're doing. We know the current challenges that we have, but here's what our solution is, and here's what we've put in place. Come to Ireland, and constantly repeat that message. So there's my optimistic, positive outlook for our future. We have a wonderful future.
Thank you, Nicola. I think that's going to be a relief to everybody participating. And thanks to, Paul, do you want to get in a last word there?
Sorry, Sarah, I made a mistake. Excuse me, I made a mistake on the website. It's .com, not .ie.
Okay.
Industryireland.com. It takes a while longer to get the IE, as we all know, which is right and proper. So apologies for that.
Okay, that's great, because that seems to be the main sentiment that's coming out of today is people want to get organized and consolidate around all of this. So if anybody does have any further questions, you can contact Hilary Hughes, and her details are on the registration page. If you're interested in getting involved in these organizations, she's at hilary@sbpevents.ie. As I say, that's on your registration page. I want to thank my second panel. That's Mark Dorman, Nicola McGrain, Sonia Thomas, Paul Davis, and Mark Corliss. Thank you all for taking part today, and to the panel area. Sarah Murphy is going to come back on and have a few words for everybody, but I just want to thank you all for participating. It was really interesting for me. I'm really grateful that I was asked to take part. So from me, stay safe, wash your hands, and back over to Sarah Murphy.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, just on a final note, I suppose just on behalf of iQuest and the Business Post, I just want to thank everyone for taking part today, and sincerely thank Sarah for chairing. We're delighted to facilitate this forum just to support our industry and work together to get everyone back to business. Just the question of support for small business was raised today, and on this point, iQuest are working with the National Small Business Recovery Plan, which is being chaired by former Secretary General of the Department of Finance, John Moran. So I'd encourage you all to visit smerecovery.ie to read the plan and pledge your support there as we work to try and get that adopted into the programme for government at the moment, and all signs are positive around that. So that's smerecovery.ie. But again, I'd like to thank Sarah, I'd like to thank all of our panellists, and yeah, I wish you all a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, Sarah.